The wind at Arlington always feels different. It doesn't just blow. It moves with purpose, like it remembers every name carved into the white stones. That's the first thing I noticed the day we buried my father. Not the silence, not the rifle salute, not even the folded American flag resting in my hands. The wind. It swept across the cemetery like it owned a place, bending the small flags planted beside thousands of graves. Row after row of white marble markers stretched across the hill, perfectly aligned, impossibly quiet. My father had been buried 30 minutes earlier. The priest had already left. The honor guard had finished their duty, and the few people who attended the service had quietly drifted away. There were only 3 people still there. Me, a groundskeeper pushing a maintenance cart far down the path, and the man walking toward me across the graves. He moved slowly but with confidence, like someone who had walked through Arlington many times before. As he got closer, the winter sun caught his shoulder. 4 silver stars, a full general, which made absolutely no sense. My father had just been buried with one of the smallest funerals I'd ever seen. No long line of mourners, no slideshow of medals, no speeches about heroism. Just me, a priest, and a name carved into stone. James Caldwell, U.S. Army, Colonel 1960 to 2025. That was it. My father had lived the same way. He died, quietly. Growing up in Savannah, Georgia, I barely understood what he had done in the military. Other kids talked about their parents' promotions, their retirement ceremonies, their war stories. My dad never did. He fixed fences, paid bills early, drank black coffee every morning at exactly 6 o'clock. After retiring from the Army, he opened a small hardware store 2 miles from our house. Said he liked the smell of lumber and machine oil better than office buildings. He never talked about combat, never bragged about anything. And when he died 2 weeks ago, sudden heart attack in his kitchen, it felt exactly like the way he lived. Simple, uncomplicated. At least, that's what I believed. Until the general stopped in front of me. He looked down at the headstone for a moment before speaking. "You must be Emily." His voice was calm and steady. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. He extended his hand. I shook it automatically, still trying to understand why a 4-star general was standing at my father's grave. "I served with your father," he said. That alone surprised me. My dad had retired nearly 20 years earlier. Most of the people he served with were long gone from active duty. The general studied the headstone quietly. Then he looked at me again. "Your father was one of the most disciplined men I ever knew." There was something about the way he said it that made the air feel heavier. Not sentimental, respectful, measured, like he was stating a fact. "Thank you," I said. He nodded slightly. Then he said something that made absolutely no sense. "You need to fly to Zurich." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Zurich, Switzerland." The wind pushed another wave of flags sideways. "Go to Hollenberg Private Bank," he continued. "Give them your father's name." I stared at him. "I don't understand." "They will." He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a plain white card. No rank, no military insignia, just a phone number with a Swiss country code, and a name written neatly in black ink. Hollenberg. I looked back up. Why would I go there? For a moment he seemed to consider how much to say. Then he spoke quietly. "Because your father solved problems most people never even knew existed." The sentence lingered in the cold air. "What kind of problems?" I asked. But the general didn't answer. He gave a small nod, turned, and began walking back across the rows of marble headstones. "Wait," I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn fully around. "You'll understand when you get there," he said. And then he left. At least, not that I knew. My father was the most predictable man I had ever met. Growing up, life with him followed a strict rhythm. Wake up at 5:30, coffee at 6, open the hardware store at 7, dinner at 6:30 every evening. Sunday afternoons were for fishing. Every single week. When my mom died 15 years ago, he didn't remarry, didn't date, didn't change his routine. He just kept moving forward. Steady. That word described him better than anything else. Steady. Which is why finding the card in my hand felt so strange. My older brother Ryan had already left for Atlanta by the time I returned to my dad's house that evening. He had stayed just long enough to attend the burial. Ryan had always been the opposite of steady. Where I worked a stable job as a financial compliance analyst, he jumped from one business idea to another. Restaurants, crypto trading, a gym franchise that lasted less than a year. Dad had helped him more than once, quietly, without judgment. Ryan's last comment before leaving Arlington still echoed in my mind. Well, I guess that's it, he said. Dad never had much. There was something in his voice when he said it. Not grief. More like evaluation. The house felt exactly the same as it always had. My father's boots were still by the door. His favorite coffee mug was drying beside the sink. The living room looked untouched. No trophies. No framed medals. Nothing that suggested a remarkable military career. Just ordinary furniture and the smell of wood polish. If someone had walked in off the street, they would have assumed a retired store owner lived there. Not a man a 4-star general would show up for. I placed the white card on the kitchen counter. For a long time, I didn't touch it again. Instead, I started opening drawers. Not because I was looking for secrets. At least, that's what I told myself. Old tax returns. Receipts from hardware suppliers. Insurance papers. Everything looked normal. Small. Predictable. Exactly the life my father appeared to live. Until I opened the closet in his bedroom. There was a metal lockbox on the shelf. Inside it was his passport. I almost closed it immediately. My father hated flying. Or at least, that's what he always said. But when I flipped through the pages, I froze. Stamp, stamp, stamp. Germany, France, Switzerland. Multiple entries over the past 20 years. Trips he had never mentioned. Trips that didn't make sense for a man who barely left Georgia. I sat on the edge of his bed staring at the passport. My phone buzzed. Ryan. I answered. So, he said immediately. Have you gone through the house yet? A little. Anything interesting? The word hung in the air. No, I said slowly. He sighed. Yeah, figures. It was the same tone from earlier. Assessment. Calculation. I mean, he never had much, Ryan continued. Right? I don't know yet. Well, if there's anything left, we should divide it clean. Efficient. Transactional. I looked at the Swiss passport stamps again. Yeah, I said quietly. We'll see. After I hung up, I walked back into the kitchen. The white card was still on the counter. The Swiss number looked even stranger now. For most of my life, I've been a careful person. I work in compliance. My entire job revolves around rules, documentation, and avoiding unnecessary risks. I don't chase mysteries. But something about the way that General had spoken didn't feel dramatic. It felt procedural, like he was passing along instructions that had been waiting a long time. The next morning, I dialed the number. A woman answered after 2 rings. Hollenberg Private Banking. How may I assist you? Her English was precise, European. Hi, I said. My name is Emily Caldwell. Yes? I'm calling about my father. And his name? James Caldwell. There was a pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed slightly. Yes, Miss Caldwell. My heart slowed. We have been expecting you. The woman on the phone didn't sound surprised. She sounded prepared. We have been expecting you. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My mind was still trying to process the sentence. Expecting me? I finally asked. Yes, Ms. Caldwell. Her tone remained calm, professional, almost rehearsed. Your father arranged that you contact us in the event of his passing. My heart slowed instead of racing. That was the strange thing about the entire situation. Nothing felt dramatic. It felt organized. Can you tell me what this is about? I asked. I'm afraid that information can only be discussed in person. Of course it could. And where would that be? Our office in Zurich. I glanced at the passport sitting on the kitchen table. Switzerland. The stamp suddenly made sense. When would you be able to travel? The question was asked so casually it felt like she was asking about a dentist appointment. I'd need a few days. That is perfectly understandable. She paused briefly. When you arrive, please bring identification and a certified copy of your father's death certificate. The way she said it made it clear this was routine, planned. My father had arranged this long before he died. Okay, I said slowly. We will prepare for your visit. And just like that, the call ended. No explanation. No clues. Just confirmation that something real was waiting on the other side of the Atlantic. I didn't tell my brother. At least not yet. Ryan had a way of turning every situation into a financial equation. He'd see Switzerland and immediately think one thing: money. And if there was money involved, Ryan would move fast. Too fast. The next day he called again. "So what's happening with the house?" he asked. "I'm still sorting through things. You should get it appraised soon." "It's been 2 days. I'm just being practical." That was Ryan's favorite word. Practical. "Did Dad leave any investments?" he asked. "Nothing major." There was a pause. "You sure?" "Yes," he sighed. "Well, if there's anything, we should divide it evenly. Divide, split, clean." Ryan always spoke in the language of transactions. I ended the call quickly. Then I opened my laptop. The flight to Zurich was already booked, 3 days away. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something shift inside me. My father had a secret, not a reckless one, a structured one. And somehow I was now part of it. Packing felt strange. I kept expecting to wake up and realize the entire situation had been a misunderstanding, that the general had approached the wrong person, that the Swiss bank had mistaken my father for someone else. But the passport stamps were real. The phone call was real. And the ticket sitting in my email inbox was very real. I packed light. 1 suitcase, laptop, documents, passport, and my father's death certificate. Before leaving, I walked through the house one more time. The place looked exactly the same as it always had. Simple, modest, predictable. The kitchen table where Dad did crossword puzzles every Sunday, the old couch where he watched baseball, the garage where he kept tools organized with almost military precision. Nothing about this house suggested international finance. Nothing about it suggested Switzerland. Yet, somehow, that's exactly where I was going. The flight from Atlanta to Zurich took almost 9 hours. 9 hours is a long time to sit with unanswered questions. I spent most of it staring at the dark ocean outside the window, trying to piece together a version of my father that included secret European travel. It didn't fit. The man I knew was steady, routine-driven, practical. He didn't hide things, at least not that I had ever noticed. But the passport told a different story, and the general at Arlington had confirmed it. By the time the plane landed, the sky over Switzerland was gray and cold. Zurich Airport was quiet compared to Atlanta. Clean. Efficient. Everything moved with quiet precision. It reminded me of my father in an odd way. Structured, ordered, disciplined. I took a taxi into the city. The driver spoke very little English, which was fine because I didn't feel like talking. My mind was too busy preparing for whatever waited at the bank. Hollenberg Private Bank didn't look like a movie version of a Swiss vault. There were no giant gold doors, no dramatic security gates, just a tall stone building with understated signage. Quiet. Professional. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of polished wood. A receptionist greeted me politely. "Yes, how may I help you?" "My name is Emily Caldwell." She typed something into her computer, then looked up. "Ah. Yes, Ms. Caldwell." The same reaction as the woman on the phone. "Expectation. Please have a seat." A few minutes later, a man in a dark suit approached. "Caldwell?" "Yes. My name is Marcus Weber." He shook my hand. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Please come with me." We walked down a long hallway lined with glass offices. Everything felt quiet and controlled. No rush, no chaos. We entered a private office, and he closed the door. Then he sat down across from me. "Your father was a remarkable man," he said. That sentence caught my attention immediately. "You knew him?" "In a professional capacity." He opened a folder on the desk. Inside were several documents, each one signed by my father. Dated, organized, carefully structured. "This," Marcus said, "is the trust your father established with our institution in 2003. I stared at him. "A trust?" "Yes." My mind tried to catch up. "For what purpose?" He folded his hands calmly. "To support a specific group of individuals." "Who?" "Former service members and their families." The room felt smaller suddenly. "My father started a charity?" "Not exactly," Marcus said. "This trust operates privately and confidentially." He turned one of the documents toward me. There were numbers on the page, large ones. At first they didn't register. Then my brain finally processed them. 8 digits. My stomach tightened. This can't be right, I said quietly. It is correct. How much is in the trust? Marcus answered without hesitation. Currently, approximately $14.3 million. The number hung in the air. My father. The man who drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. The man who clipped coupons. The man who ran a small hardware store. Had quietly built a $14 million trust in Switzerland. How? I asked. Disciplined investments, Marcus said. Your father contributed regularly for more than 20 years. My mind raced through every memory I had of him. Nothing about his life suggested that kind of wealth. Yet here it was, real, documented, waiting. What happens now? I asked. Marcus slid another document toward me. You are the successor trustee. I blinked. What? Upon your father's passing, full oversight transfers to you. My chest tightened. So I control it? You oversee it, he corrected. There are guidelines your father established regarding distributions. And if I chose to dissolve it? You could, he said it calmly. But your father strongly structured it to continue. I looked down at the paperwork again. $14 million. But it wasn't mine. Not really. It was responsibility. Is there anything else? I asked. Marcus nodded. Yes. He opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. This was written by your father. My throat tightened. It was to be given to you after his death. He placed it gently on the desk. I stared at my father's handwriting on the front. 3 simple words. For Emily. Before I could open it, my phone buzzed. Ryan. I let it ring once. Then I answered. So? He asked immediately. What did Dad's voyeur say? I looked down at the numbers again. The trust. The responsibility. The secret my father had carried for 2 decades. There's something, I said. Ryan's voice sharpened instantly. How much? And in that moment, I understood something important. My father hadn't hidden money. He had built something. Something deliberate. Something steady. And my brother had absolutely no idea what our father had really been doing all those years. I didn't answer Ryan's question. How much? He repeated. His voice had that familiar edge now, the one that appeared anytime money entered the conversation. I'm still reviewing paperwork, I said. That's not what I asked. I know. There was a pause on the line. Ryan exhaled slowly. Emily, if Dad left something significant, we need to handle it together. Together. The word sounded nice, but experience told me it usually meant something else. Divide it. Split it. Spend it. I'll call you when I understand everything, I said. Then I ended the call before he could push further. For a moment, I just sat there in Marcus Weber's quiet office, staring at my phone. The silence felt heavier now. Marcus waited patiently. Swiss patience, I realized. Measured. Professional. When I finally looked up again, the sealed envelope was still sitting between us. My father's handwriting looked exactly the same as it had when I was a kid. Straight block letters. Neat. Disciplined? No flourish. No emotion. Just 3 words. For Emily. My fingers hesitated for a moment before opening it. The paper inside was thick. Folded once. I unfolded it slowly. The first sentence made my chest tighten. If you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to explain everything in person. That sounded exactly like him. Direct. Practical. No unnecessary drama. I kept reading. I didn't hide this from you because I didn't trust you. I hid it because money changes how people listen. I stopped reading for a moment. The sentence hit harder than I expected. Money changes how people listen. Ryan's voice from 5 minutes earlier echoed in my head. How much? I continued. After I retired from the army, I stayed in contact with a small group of men I served with. Not reunions. Not social calls. Just quiet check-ins. Over time, some of them started struggling. Injuries that never healed. Cancers connected to deployments. Benefits that ran out long before the bills did. Some of them had families who didn't deserve to lose everything because their father served his country. I felt my throat tighten. Marcus watched quietly from across the desk. I kept reading. I realized something the government couldn't solve quickly enough. Problems don't disappear just because people stop talking about them. So I started setting money aside, slowly at first. Then, consistently. Discipline compounds. That's something the army teaches you well. There was another pause in the letter. Like my father had taken a moment to think before writing the next part. I never wanted recognition for this. If you advertise help, people start competing for it. If you provide help quietly, the right people receive it. My eyes drifted briefly toward Marcus. He gave a small nod, as if confirming what I was reading. I continued. The trust you're overseeing now was never meant to make anyone rich. It was meant to make sure certain people never lost everything. Tuition for children, medical treatments, mortgage payments when families fell behind, things that keep a life from collapsing. My chest tightened again. $14 million, not for luxury, for stability. For people my father believed deserved help. The final paragraph was shorter, but it carried the most weight. You may be wondering why I chose you. The answer is simple. You understand responsibility. Ryan understands opportunity. Those are not the same thing. I closed my eyes briefly. Even after death, my father still knew exactly who we were. The final line was almost an afterthought, but it was the most personal part of the entire letter. Steady wins. I trust you to keep it steady. I folded the letter carefully. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Marcus broke the silence. Your father helped many people, he said. How many? He opened another folder. Inside were summaries. Names removed for privacy. But the situations were clear. A veteran in Texas whose cancer treatment wasn't fully covered. A widow in Ohio whose mortgage had fallen behind after her husband's stroke. A teenage girl in Arizona whose father lost his mobility after a training accident. Each case had a payment attached. Tuition, medical transport, housing support, small things that added up to stability, none of it flashy, none of it clashy. Just steady. Just like my father. How long has this been happening? I asked. Since 2003, Marcus said. 22 years. My father had quietly supported dozens of families for more than 2 decades. And no one knew. Not the neighbors. Not the people at the hardware store. Not even me. Why Switzerland? I asked. Privacy, Marcus replied. Your father valued discretion. Of course he did. Is the trust still active? Yes. Distributions are scheduled quarterly. And now I control them? You oversee them, Marcus corrected again. Within the guidelines he established. I nodded slowly. Responsibility. That word kept returning. It felt heavier now. Eventually, I asked the question I had been avoiding. How much exactly? Marcus looked down at the documents. The current valuation is approximately $14.3 million. The number still felt unreal, not billionaire wealth, but life-changing, life-defining. How did he build this while running a hardware store? Marcus gave a faint smile. Discipline. Your father invested early in several long-term funds. Energy. Defense. International logistics. He rarely withdrew anything. My father had always lived modestly. Now I knew why. He wasn't saving for himself. He was building something. My phone buzzed. Ryan again. I hesitated, then answered. So, he said immediately, what's the story? I stared at the trust documents, the letter, the responsibilities sitting in front of me. There's a trust, I said. Ryan was quiet for a second. A trust? Yes. How much? There it was again. Always the number first. 14 million, I said. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Jesus. The word slipped out before he could stop it. And you're telling me Dad never helped me properly? He helped you a lot, I said quietly. That was loans, Ryan snapped. This is inheritance. It's not that simple. It is that simple, he insisted. You're sitting on $14 million that belongs to both of us. I felt the weight of my father's letter again. Money changes how people listen. It's not mine to divide, I said. What does that mean? It's structured for who? Veterans and their families. Ryan was silent again. Then he laughed. Not happily. So Dad left $14 million to strangers? They're not strangers to him. What about his own kids? I'm the trustee. That's not what I asked. The tension in his voice was rising now. So what do I get? He said. I didn't answer immediately because the truth was complicated. Ryan had received help for years, but he wasn't named as a beneficiary. Finally, I said it. You're not listed. The silence that followed was heavier than anything we had said before. So he cut me out. No, that's exactly what that means. He made a decision. Ryan's voice dropped lower. That money should be split. It's not mine to split. You could dissolve it. Marcus looked at me calmly across the desk. He knew Ryan was right. Legally, I could. But doing that would erase everything my father built. Ryan spoke again. Emily, don't be stupid. That word again. Stupid. It's $14 million. I know. You could change our lives. The strange thing was, my life didn't feel changed. It felt heavier, more complicated, more responsible. I'll call you later, I said. Then I ended the call. Marcus waited until I put the phone down. Family disputes are not uncommon in these situations, he said. I figured. You have legal authority over the trust. I understand. And if your brother contests it, there are safeguards. How strong? Very. I nodded slowly. The number 14 million echoed in my mind. For a moment, I imagined the easy path. Liquidate the trust. Split the money. Walk away. No stress. No responsibility. But that wasn't what my father built. And it wasn't why he trusted me. When I stepped outside the bank later that afternoon, the air in Zurich felt colder than before. The lake stretched gray beneath the winter sky. People walked along the waterfront like any other day. No one knew I had just discovered my father's secret life. No one knew I was now responsible for $14 million meant to help strangers, or that my own brother was already preparing to fight me over it. As I stood there watching the water, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ryan. 3 words. Call your lawyer. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket, because I already knew something he didn't. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about my father's legacy. And I had a feeling Ryan wasn't going to accept that quietly. The flight back from Zurich felt longer than the one that took me there. Nothing about the world had changed. The plane still hummed steadily across the Atlantic. Passengers still watched movies and slept under thin airline blankets. But everything inside my life had shifted. 2 days earlier, I believed my father had died, leaving behind a modest estate. A house, a small hardware store, some retirement savings. Now I knew he had quietly built something far larger. A $14 million trust, and he had left it to me to protect. Not inherit, protect. The difference mattered more than I realized, especially because Ryan didn't see that difference at all. When I pulled into my father's driveway in Savannah, Ryan's truck was already there. That didn't surprise me. What surprised me was the legal pad sitting on the kitchen table when I walked inside. Ryan looked up. You're back. Yes. He didn't ask how the flight was. He didn't ask about Switzerland. He went straight to the point. So it's real, he said. Yes. How much? You already know. 14 million, he repeated slowly. The number sounded heavier when spoken out loud. Ryan leaned back in his chair. You're controlling all of it. I oversee it. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. He tapped the pen against his legal pad. My lawyer says trusts like that can be challenged. Of course he had already talked to a lawyer. How? I asked calmly. Undue influence. Lack of disclosure. Foreign asset concealment. The words sounded like they had been memorized. You move fast, I said. Ryan shrugged. I move practical. That word again. Practical. Dad created it 22 years ago, I said. That doesn't matter. It actually matters a lot. Ryan leaned forward. Emily, he left $14 million sitting overseas while I struggled for years. He helped you, I said, with loans. He covered your credit cards twice. Ryan looked away. That was different. No, I said quietly. It wasn't. The tension in the room thickened. Finally, Ryan said the thing he had clearly been building toward. We should split it. It's not mine to split. You're the trustee. Yes. So dissolve it. No. The word landed harder than I expected. Ryan stared at me. You're serious. You're choosing strangers over your own brother. I'm choosing what Dad built. Ryan stood up suddenly and paced across the kitchen. You always did this, he said. Did what? Played the responsible one. I am responsible. You always wanted his approval. I shook my head. That's not true. Yes, it is. Ryan stopped pacing. He trusted you more, he said quietly. I didn't argue, because in some ways, he wasn't wrong. There was something in the trust documents Ryan hadn't seen yet. Something my father had anticipated. A secondary provision. Family stabilization. If I chose, I could allocate a limited percentage annually to assist immediate family members under structured conditions. Debt counseling. Financial oversight. Gradual distributions tied to accountability. In other words, help. But not a blank check. Dad had known Ryan would struggle, and he had planned for that. Carefully, deliberately. I could help you, I said slowly. Ryan looked at me sharply. What does that mean? There's a clause for family support. His eyes lit up instantly. How much? Structured assistance. His expression darkened. What kind of structure? Debt counseling. Financial planning. Controlled payments. Ryan stared at me like I had just insulted him. You want to manage me? I want to stabilize things. I'm not a project. You're my brother. Ryan shook his head slowly. You sound exactly like him. I learned from him. He grabbed his jacket. I'll let the lawyers handle this. The lawsuit arrived 3 weeks later. Not dramatic. No shouting. No angry confrontation. Just a thick envelope delivered by a process server. Inside was a formal petition filed in Chatham County Circuit Court. Ryan was challenging the trust. His attorney argued 3 main points. The trust unfairly deprived a direct heir of inheritance. My father failed to properly disclose the full value of foreign assets. As trustee, I held disproportionate power over family wealth. Legal language has a way of turning families into case numbers. Reading my brother's name on the document felt surreal. I called a lawyer the same afternoon. His name was Thomas Whitaker. 70 years old, Navy veteran, calm voice. He read the trust documents carefully, then leaned back in his chair. Your father was thorough. Is it solid? I asked. Very. Ryan's lawyer says they can challenge it. Anyone can challenge anything, Thomas said. That doesn't mean they'll win. He tapped the paperwork lightly. This trust predates the dispute by more than 20 years. It's legally established, and it clearly defines your authority. So what happens now? We let the court confirm what your father already structured. Courtrooms are much less dramatic than television makes them look. No shouting, no surprise confessions, just fluorescent lighting and quiet procedure. Ryan sat across the room at the other table. He looked tired, older, but still determined. His attorney argued first. Your Honor, this trust effectively denies my client fair access to family inheritance while granting unilateral control to the defendant. Thomas Whitaker stood slowly. The trust was established in 2003, he said calmly. It predates any alleged dispute. The decedent clearly outlined its purpose and successor trustee. There is no evidence of undue influence. The judge listened quietly, then asked for additional documentation. Investment records, certification from the Swiss bank, proof of historical distributions. Another hearing was scheduled. Outside the courthouse, Ryan finally spoke to me. You could end this today, he said. How? Split the money. It's not mine to split. It's $14 million, and it's not ours. Ryan shook his head. You're making him into something bigger than he was. I met his eyes. No, I said quietly. I'm discovering who he actually was. The second hearing took place a month later. More documents, more financial records. Everything clean, everything consistent. Then something unexpected happened. A man walked quietly into the courtroom. He wore a dark suit, silver hair, straight posture. I recognized him immediately, the general from Arlington. 4 stars. Ryan noticed him too. His expression shifted. Thomas leaned toward me and whispered, That's a very strong witness. When the general took the stand, the courtroom became completely silent. He spoke calmly. No theatrics. I served with Colonel James Caldwell for many years. Was he a trustworthy officer? The judge asked. Without question. Were you aware of his intentions regarding the trust? Yes. Did you influence its creation? The general shook his head. No one influenced James Caldwell. If anything, he influenced the rest of us. Ryan's lawyer tried to suggest the general had pressured my father. The general didn't raise his voice, but his response ended the argument instantly. Colonel Caldwell did not follow orders blindly, he said. He gave them. A few people in the courtroom exchanged glances. Authority like that carries weight. The judge reviewed the evidence for nearly an hour. When she returned, her decision was brief. The court finds the trust legally valid. It was properly established. There is no evidence of undue influence. The petition is dismissed, just like that. No dramatic moment, no applause. Just one sentence that ended the case. Ryan had lost. Outside the courthouse, Ryan stood beside his truck. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. You really weren't going to bend, he said. No, you'd rather let me lose publicly. I didn't make you file. Ryan stared at the pavement. Then he said something I didn't expect. He never trusted me. That's not true. It feels true. I didn't argue, because feelings don't change facts, and facts were complicated. Dad had trusted me with oversight, but that didn't mean he didn't love Ryan. Love and trust don't always get distributed the same way. I'm not your enemy, I said. Ryan gave a tired half smile. Feels like you are. He climbed into his truck and drove away. That night, I opened the small safe in the hallway closet. I had found the combination earlier in one of Dad's notebooks. Inside were only 3 things: a folded American flag, a photograph of my father standing with 3 other men, and a small handwritten note. 2 words. Steady wins. That was it. No instructions, no speeches, just the same philosophy he had lived by. Quiet, disciplined, consistent. Ryan had tried to force the trust open. Instead, he had revealed something deeper. My father's quiet life had never been small. It had just been steady. And now that steady life was my responsibility to continue. Whether my brother accepted it or not, winning in court didn't feel like victory. It felt like paperwork. The judge dismissed Ryan's case on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, I was back at my father's house, staring at the same quiet living room I'd grown up in. Nothing had changed. The same worn couch, the same wooden coffee table with a faint ring from a mug my dad always forgot to use a coaster for. The same silence. But now I knew something I hadn't known my entire life. My father had lived 2 lives, one everyone saw, and one almost nobody knew about. 3 days after the court ruling, I had my first long call with the Swiss office. Marcus Weber appeared on my laptop screen, calm as always. We should review the upcoming disbursements, he said. I opened the spreadsheet he had emailed earlier. It contained a list of cases, still anonymized for privacy. But now that I was trustee, I could access the details. The first file I opened belonged to a man named Carlos Mendoza, former Army Ranger. 2 deployments in Afghanistan, severe spinal injury during a training exercise in 2012. Insurance had covered some treatment, but not enough. The trust had quietly paid for 3 surgeries over the years. Without it, his family would have lost their house. I scrolled to the next file. Melissa Carter, widow. Her husband, a Marine helicopter mechanic, died from complications linked to chemical exposure. 2 kids. The trust had covered their school tuition for 5 years. There were dozens of cases like this. Not massive payouts, not luxury. Just the kind of support that kept people from losing everything. Marcus watched me review the files. Your father believed in precision, he said. I can see that. Each case was vetted carefully. How did he even find these people? Mostly through military networks, some through referrals. And sometimes, Marcus added, through the general you met. That made sense. The 4-star general had known exactly what my father was building, probably helped guide it. How many families are currently receiving support, I asked. 17. 17 families. All quietly connected to a man who ran a small hardware store in Savannah. After the court ruling, Ryan disappeared. Not literally, but the phone calls stopped. No texts. No updates. For almost 2 weeks, I didn't hear from him at all. Part of me understood why. Losing a lawsuit against your own sister wasn't easy, especially when the case involved $14 million. But another part of me worried. Ryan had never handled failure well. He tended to double down on risky decisions afterward. And risky decisions were exactly what had gotten him into trouble before. 2 weeks after the court case ended, I made a decision. I wanted to meet one of the people my father had helped. Marcus arranged the contact. The first person who agreed to meet was Carlos Mendoza. He lived in San Antonio, Texas. When I knocked on his door, I had no idea what to expect. A man in a wheelchair opened it. Late 40s, broad shoulders, kind eyes. "You must be Emily," he said. "Yes," he smiled. "Your father helped save my life." That sentence hit me harder than anything I'd heard in court. Carlos rolled back slightly to let me inside. The house was modest but warm. Family photos lined the walls. 2 teenage boys sat at the kitchen table doing homework. "My sons," Carlos said proudly. "They both know who your dad was." The boys stood and shook my hand politely. I didn't know what to say. Finally, I asked the question that had been building in my mind. "How did you meet my father?" Carlos laughed softly. "I never actually did. That surprised me. He just showed up in our lives when we needed help." Carlos explained that after his injury, medical bills had piled up quickly. The VA covered some expenses, but not everything. At one point, his family had been 3 months behind on their mortgage. Then one day, the bank called. The balance had been brought current. Anonymous payment. No explanation. Over time, more support arrived. Therapy equipment. Transportation to specialists. Eventually, Carlos discovered it came from a private trust. Your father's trust. "He never wanted thanks," Carlos said. "He just wanted us to keep moving forward." I felt my throat tighten. That sounded exactly like him. The night I flew home from Texas, my phone finally rang. "Ryan." I answered. "Hey," he said. His voice sounded different. Tired. "Hey." There was a pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I lost the townhouse." My stomach tightened. What happened? Missed too many payments. I had seen the signs coming. Still, hearing it out loud hurt. "Where are you staying? With a friend for now?" Another pause. Then Ryan said quietly, "You were right." I didn't say anything, he continued. "I thought Dad was holding out on me, but he wasn't. No, he was building something bigger." "Yes?" Ryan sighed. "I wish I had understood that earlier. So did I." A few days later, I drove to Atlanta to see Ryan. His friend's apartment was small. Temporary. Ryan looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him. Less defensive, too. We sat at the kitchen table, the same way we had sat at Dad's house months earlier, only this time the tension felt different. "I met one of the families Dad helped," I told him. Ryan looked up. "What was that like?" "Humbling." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "about Dad, about everything. I spent years believing he didn't believe in me." "He did," I said. "He just believed in structure more." Ryan gave a tired smile. "That sounds like him." I took a deep breath. There's still the family clause. Ryan looked at me carefully. "You mean the stabilization thing?" "Yes." "What does that actually mean?" "It means I can help you." His expression shifted slightly, but not with a blank check. Ryan nodded. "Fair. We'd start with financial counseling." "Okay. Debt restructuring. Fine. Then gradual distributions tied to progress." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "You know something?" "What?" "That actually sounds like something Dad would do." "It is." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I'll do it." Ryan's financial counseling started 2 weeks later. At first, he hated it. Budget reviews, spending audits, accountability. But something surprising happened after the first few months. He stuck with it. Credit cards closed, unnecessary expenses cut, side jobs taken. Slowly, the chaos in his finances started turning into structure. It wasn't dramatic, just steady progress. Exactly the way my father would have wanted. 6 months after the court case ended, I returned to Arlington. I stood in front of my father's grave again. The wind moved across the cemetery the same way it had the day we buried him. Rows of white stones. Small flags bending in the breeze. The world looked exactly the same, but I saw it differently now. Because I finally understood something. My father hadn't left us $14 million. He had left us a standard, discipline, responsibility, steady work done quietly over time. Ryan was learning it now. So was I. And as I stood there looking at the simple headstone, I realized something else. The greatest legacy someone leaves behind isn't the money. It's the pattern of choices they teach you to follow. My father had lived quietly, but the life he built was anything but small. It just took losing him to see the full picture. And now it was my responsibility to keep it steady.